A welterweight matchup here. Punahele Soriano taking on Miguel Baeza. And this is a battle of busted prospects, guys, with all due respect. 3-fight losing skid for Caramel Thunder, Miguel Baeza. 2-fight skid for Punahele Soriano coming into this one. Anthropomorphics, it's going to check the boxes here for Miguel Baeza. He's the taller guy. He's going to have a longer reach here. Punahele Soriano is dropping down a weight class to 170 pounds. I don't know if that's a great idea for him, but I also think he's kind of out of options at 185. I don't know who this guy could realistically beat. I think there are guys that he could defeat, but based on that showing he had against Stoltzfus, based on the showing he had against Roman Kopylov, I really struggled to see how he would clearly get a major gap on these guys. Same thing, losing a fight to Nick Maximov that I thought could have went either way. But when you look back, Maximov is a guy that wasn't really long for the UFC, right? And you look at his ability to get the win there. It was just by grinding Soriano to a halt in his pace, made him do nothing, forced him against the fence for long periods of time. And you see Soriano is just a very negative fighter in terms of he doesn't throw that much output. When he does throw output, it tires him out. He commits to throwing everything with 100% power, despite his coaches pleading with him not to. He's susceptible to body work. You could definitely hurt him and get after him with body work. You can make him fatigued and tired. And his wins have just aged like, sour milk as well. Dusko Todorovic, a guy who at the time was an undefeated fighter. He's now 12-4. So you could say, hey, Puna broke the seal, but the guy has been losing a bunch of fights since. Oscar Pichota, guy who's not very high level. Jamie Pickett, one of the guys who really struggled at the UFC level. And then Dolce Lungiambula, a guy who's extremely average. He was 11-4 at the time. He's 11-6 now. And he was just horrible in his whole UFC run. Got finished in most of his fights. So, yeah, his only win in the UFC was over Marcus Perez and Daquan Townsend. And that kind of tells you everything that you need to know. So I think of this fight and I say to myself, okay, you got Punahele Soriano and the loss to Kopylov. You could forgive that one. If you want, I guess you could forgive the loss to Stoltzfus. How do you forgive the loss to Maximov? I'm not sure. You forgive the loss to Brendan Allen, certainly. But at the time, guys, the hype was such that this guy was minus 110 against Brendan Allen. I honestly thought he was going to win. And the reason being, he mixed in the wrestling in his fights, regionally. Right, he would go out there, take people down, use his Wartburg experience, use the fact that he had wrestled at a high level Division III, go take people down, put people on the ground when he started to get tired. And he couldn't do that anymore, right? He's not putting down anybody with his takedowns. Takedowns stink at the UFC level. And most of what we've seen from him is a guy who gets tired, overextends, makes bad decisions, can be finished. No things that I like to hear about a fighter. So we wish him the best. He seems like a nice guy. And I always want to see people put on for D3 Wrestling. Baldwin Wallace on the shirt, right? One of the best D3 wrestling programs in the country. Shout out to those guys. They continue to just put in work every year, get better every year. Great coaching, great leadership. But when you're looking at a guy like Punahele Soriano, I just haven't seen progression at all. I've seen regression. I've seen a guy getting worse. I've seen a guy not putting forth the same amount of effort. I've seen a guy looking sloppy. So maybe is it a wake-up call? Like, hey, I'm about to get my ass cut from the UFC, so I better go get my ass in shape, get down to 170 and get a win. Maybe that's the way that it is. But for me, I think that Puna has really not shown enough to bet on him in his recent fights, right? And so you're getting some plus money upside. They're trying to tempt you, lure you with that. He was heavily favored to beat Dustin Stoltzfus. He got crushed. He was favored to beat Roman Kopylov. He lost the fight. He was favored to beat Nick Maximov. He lost a split decision. It was pick him against Brendan Allen. He lost the unanimous decision, got absolutely slaughtered with body kicks in that fight. I think Baeza, if he's smart, can torch him with low kicks and body kicks in this fight. Then you look at the Dalcha fight, and it was pretty competitive. And again, it just doesn't age very well. The Dusko fight, he caught him on the chin. The Oscar fight, he caught him on the chin. He wasn't able to finish Jamie Pickett like Kyle Dawkins was, right? So for me, this is like they're really trying to find a way to get Miguel Baeza back in the win column. That's why they put him against this guy. Now, as for Miguel Baeza, he has put in the work on the grappling mats, right? You look, he got an arm triangle win over Takashi Sato after he hurt him on the feet, knocked out Matt Brown after he got hurt badly on the feet. He leg kicked Hector Aldana in the UFC debut. So he's had a pretty good showing in his career prior to his string of losses, right? What happened? Everything went wrong. He loses to Santiago Ponzinibbio via unanimous decision. No skin off your nose. But then he gets brutally knocked out by Chaos Williams, and he was favored to win. So that's 2 times in a row. You go out there, you're favored to win. People expect a lot from you, and you let him down. The one that really, looks terrible is the Andre Fialho loss. And Andre Fialho is basically a KO or bust type fighter. He's not very good. Very average guy. Definitely not as good as Miguel Baeza. Not as good as Baeza on the mat. Certainly not even close. But he's big. He was young. And he was able to go out there and clip him on the chin. So then you look. They tried to have him fight Diego Lima. Diego Lima retires. Then they have him try to fight Johan Lioness, and Baeza gets injured. Johan Lioness gets absolutely exposed in his fight. Then you have Jake Matthews against Baeza, and Baeza withdrew from that bout. Then he had a canceled bout against Neil Magny and instead goes out there and submits Guillermo Neves in a grappling match. So he's gone out there and he's shown a willingness, to compete. But he's 3-3 in the promotion. He needs to go right now. He needs to get a win under his belt. And he's got a very exploitable opponent here. So I think that Baeza can win this fight. I think if he's wise, he's going to come out here looking to take Puna down, hit him with body kicks, make him tired, and submit him. And honestly, if Dustin Stoltzfus can submit you, I'm not saying Dustin isn't a fine grappler. He's got decent takedowns. He's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But it was more so a guy who was fatigued and had nothing left to offer and looked kind of like a fish off of his back. And I think that Baeza is a much better grappler in terms of his technique. And I think that when you look at it, it's an interesting fight because I do think Baeza's chin is pretty terrible. And Puna does have one good offering, right? Which is I can knock people out. Matt Brown hurt him. All the guys that knocked him out hurt him. So definitely we could see Miguel Baeza get hurt, get clipped in this fight. But at 31 years of age, taking some time off, kind of expecting Miguel Baeza to finish this fight. So shout out to Small World Lifter says, Liam, do you think the lack of KOs last week was due to the new gloves? Might be best to lay off KO props for the few weeks. Honestly, no. I think it was a function of the fighters. I think it was a function of the matchups and a lack of intensity. But we'll see. If it happens again this week, I think it's something more to take serious. But to your point, very small sample size. So I'm not overthinking it. I just think it was a shitty card, shitty energy. Just was what it was. There are a few fights decently favored to end ITD at least. Yeah, I personally see a bunch of finishes on this card. There's 14 fights. Just for the sake of TV capital, they're going to be looking for some finishes here. Shout out to Dixon says, I'm expecting a ton of decisions again. Everyone is going to be saying the UFC is dead after this week. UFC is dead. I'm kidding, but just a terrible card over the weekend. Terrible, terrible, terrible fights. Dreadful fights. The UFC has been trying to soft match make Puna for years now. He keeps dropping the ball. Great first fight for him at 170. Man, wow. I think that's aggressive. Favorite bet on the card. Don't understand the line movement. Puna dropping in weight will be better shape. First straight left lands on Baeza's chin. He's going down. I mean, listen, I think that Baeza could get clipped and knocked out. Absolutely. But the truth is, like, skill for skill, Puna's not better than him at anything. So I also worry about Puna's cardio and his chin cutting down to 170. Almost want to see it to believe it. Puna doesn't seem like the most disciplined guy in the world. But I wish you the best of luck with your bet. I'll never talk anybody off a dog. I do think as a dog, he's live, right? Just from a money line standpoint, I think you could knock him out for sure. And so that's the way I would look to play it is Puna by KO if I'm on that side, or Puna ITD, something like that. I do think that Puna, he could win a decision here, but I think that if this fight goes 15 minutes, that means something probably went wrong for Puna along the way. That's a gut feeling though. So interesting fight. I always liked Puna, but I haven't been seeing any kind of improvement from him. And for the Baeza side of things, like, I don't think he's looked terrible. He's just gotten clipped on the chin by a couple strikers in a row. So I think a third knockout, you start to really worry about Baeza. The chin doesn't look great in how he's gotten hurt before in the past, but 2 knockouts, as my guy Pepe Sylvia said, it's nothing crazy. I do tend to agree with that. Remember, the KFC Yum Center has a seating capacity of 20,000. Wow. The crowd is going to play a part in some of these matchups. Impressive. Plus 1,500 KO1, that has my attention. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Puna's win condition, I do think, is pretty front loaded. So Puna early round props, round 1 and 2, unders, things like that. I think that's all correlated with the Puna win. But I think Baeza sub or Puna by knockout. That's the way I see it. Pretty straightforward for me. I am surprised to see Baeza KO is like a pretty short line. I don't see that happening at a very high clip, but I guess they're just basing that on Puna gassing out. So I can't rule that out either.